Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining today's webinar. I'm Jasper Beck, DevOps Customer Engineer at Circle CI. In today's webinar, we are going to talk about some practical tips and tricks to optimize your pipelines at Circle CI. And before starting our webinar, let me go up to some notes. If you have any questions, you can ask those questions on Q&A section of Zoom. I think you can access it from your Zoom. And I try to answer those questions at the end of webinar. And please do not share any your private information on chat and Q&A. It's public. If you have any private information include question like your bills or your company info, please reach to our support desk and our support team would address to your questions. Okay, we have cleared that part. Now let's jump to our webinar. Okay. A brief introduction about Circle CI. Circle CI is founded in 2011, and now we have like more than 600 employees, and we're operating in more than, I think, in 5 continents. And Circle CI is used across in all industries like fintech, healthcare, energy, and also many open source projects use Circle CI as a CI/CD tool. And daily, more than 1 million builds run on our platforms. So customers use our cloud platform or server hybrid solutions. And yeah, we try to help teams build better software and faster. Okay, so today I'm going to talk about some features, some important parts of the pipelines, specifically for parts of for features of Circle CI. And I try to explain each of these features with more details and try to give some general best practices. So by implementing those features, you can optimize your Circle CI builds. And the first one is the most initial point is just choosing the right environment, choosing the right running environments for your jobs. So at Circle CI, we call them executors. And the second one is using a proper caching strategy. We do have different caching features based on your needs. We do have workspaces, and we do have artifacts. Also, we do have DLC, Docker layer caching. But I'm not going to talk about those caching features today. I'm just going to talk about the caching dependencies between pipelines for the same job. And the next one is using the orbs. Orbs are basically the reusable package of YAML configuration file. So I'm going to talk about how to use these orbs. And finally, another important part of CI/CD is how to properly implement your security. So we're going to talk about API tokens, environment variables, and context. Now let's jump to choosing the right executors part. Okay. Okay. So what is an executor? Executor is defines the underlying technology, so the environment in which your jobs run. So this means when you check out your source code, so when Circle CI gets source code from your VCS. It gets the source code into executor, and it starts running your job. So you specify which executor to choose in your config file. And when you specify the executor, you can also add additional arbitrary commands. It can be tags, parameters, and also you can use one primary executor and additional secondary executors with different images available. And those executors allow users to build and test their applications in virtually in any environment, from mobile applications to Docker containers or Kubernetes containers. And so what kind of environments are available at Circle CI? At Circle CI, you can run your jobs in 4 environments: the Docker images with Docker executor, Linux virtual machine with machine executor, and macOS virtual machine with macOS executor, and Windows virtual machine with Windows executor. And the primary container, as I mentioned earlier, is the one which you need to specify in your configuration file, which is located at .circleci/config.yaml file. And you can also run additional executors to run alongside with your primary container. And it can be, for example, when you want to run MySQL server, so you can choose a Docker image as a primary container, and you run another MySQL container as a secondary executor, and you can access to MySQL server with your commands. Okay, let's go to the Docker executor. Okay. So Docker executors are basically just use Docker as an underlying environment, and use Docker containers. And at Circle CI, we do have predefined so existing Docker container images, which you can find on Docker Hub. And they are usually the fastest to start your job, to start your build. Okay. Yes, you can specify multiple Docker images in single job. Yeah, just can be so they are call it subsequent images. It can be like one subsequent image or 2, but you need one primary container for that. You cannot, for example, run CMG Postgres container by itself. You need a primary container. So if you, for example, in that case, it's Circle CI base container. So why you may need multiple containers for a single job is you can, for example, you may have application which you are testing multi-container, and you may need to leverage some kind of state of service. Yeah, in that case, it's just Postgres database. Okay. And there are some best practices of how to properly implement Docker executor. And those best practices are usually not just unique to the Docker executor, but some of those you can apply to other environments as well. The basic one, the most basic one is just avoiding the mutable text and specifying the image version exactly. And for example, when you use the latest image, it may sometimes lead to unexpected changes in your job environment. And the latest does not mean always the latest. For example, when you, let's say, when you have Alpine latest image, when you try to get the Alpine latest image, it may not get the latest, but it may just get a stale cache from 2 or 3 months ago. So we would recommend to specify the version till the latest part of till the, for example, if it's Redis, like Redis 237 or something like that. And you can use Circle CI convenience images to quick start. They have pre-installed some popular language, so you don't need to install this language by yourself. You can just use those images. And if, let's say, you are using Circle CI convenience image and you are adding, let's say, additional tools during execution, and it's piling up and your runtime increase. In that case, it may not be ideal to use just one existing Circle CI image. In that case, it's better just to create a custom image with tools already pre-installed, preloaded in that container. So whenever you just start container, you just get your custom image and you start the container and you just start your build. So in that case, we would recommend, if you have too many additional tools installed, just create your own custom image. And if you are using AWS image registry, we would suggest to use US East 1 region to store your images, because Circle CI runs its jobs in this region. So it can reduce your download time. Okay. The next is machine executor. So the machine executors, it's just Ubuntu machines, and it's based on the virtual machines execution. And one of the benefits of using machine executors is just you have root access to OS resources. With Docker, you don't have root access to operation system. So if you need full access to your job running environment, we would suggest using machine executors. And yeah, also with using machine executor, you can enable your Docker image build, and without downloading additional packages like PHP or Ruby, you can just start your Docker image and access to the Docker commands as well. You can check that available machine executors at Circle CI public docs. And also we do have macOS executors. We have two type of macOS executors. The one is running on virtual machine. The other one is running on dedicated host. So if you have, let's say, iOS or macOS application, like general iOS and macOS application, in general, you can build and test and deploy with our virtual machine resource classes. But if you need additional access, if you need GPU access, then you need to use our dedicated host, which enables audio and video testing. And when using macOS executor, you need to specify the export version. And you can check available Xcode versions on our public documentation as well. And each job is built on a unique and different, a new macOS. So you need to rebuild the whole your jobs builds again. This is the same, similar to other executors as well. Okay, and it's the same for Windows executors. The only difference with Windows executors is you need to specify its Windows version, and it's also it's which shell to use. So so Windows executors comes with profile common Windows software pre-installed, like Visual Studio or Windows Server. And for shell, yeah, you can, for example, like basically you can use Bash. And also you need to specify the resource class as well. Okay. And okay, let me go to the previous page. Yeah, another important part of choosing when choosing the executor, you need to properly define the resource class as well. Resource class is just the amount of computer resources for your job. With larger resource classes, you can leverage more CPU and RAM. With small resource classes, you save running costs. Okay. Another important aspect of CI/CD is properly implementing caching strategies. You want to avoid, for example, installing and building dependency again and again for the same job. So you want to, in that case, you can just cache the dependencies and start your job faster. So in today's session, I'm just going to talk about the caching data between pipeline runs. So for example, you can cache you cache your data at one job and use the cache data in another job in the same job, but in the next pipeline. So if you want to use cache data within the same workflow with different jobs, then you need to use the workspaces. Today, we are not going to cover about that, but we have publicly available tutorials and documentation on that. You can check that. So caching speed ups your pipelines by eliminating to download the dependencies, the same data over and over again. Okay. And when using the caching, you can, as a best practice, we would suggest to use the keys on a wide set. And fallback keys allow you to identify a set of possible cache to increase the likelihood of finding that cache data. For example, in that case, in this example, we have two fallback keys. The one with checksum package lock JSON included, and the one with just v1 and depths. So first it tries to find the first cache key, and if it does not find, it tries to find the key by v1 depths. So it increases your likelihood of cache hit. So you suggest to give multiple fallback keys when you use caching. Okay. And some of the best practices of using caching is just do not use cache for long-term storage. It's going to be expired after 15 days of usage of the latest usage. So if it's not used 15 days, the cache would be expired. And when it's expired, the new cache will be generated on the next one. And also, if the cache is saved for a certain key, you cannot overwrite that key. Just overwrite attempts would be ignored. And as a best practice and to avoid build problems, you would suggest just not to change your executor type. You can change the resource class, but not to change that your executor type. For example, if you're running on Docker container, your job, you wouldn't suggest to the same job. Just if you change it to Linux container, that caching data may not find the data, or there may be some permission problems. So we would suggest do not cache between different executors. Or if there's a chance of it's going to be changed, you can cache the data with the architecture tag. So when you here, I think here, for example, you can add that just after v1 depths, you can add the architecture tag, and the cache is stored based on the architecture. So when the job is run, it checks the architecture first, and that based on the architecture, it gets the data. And yes, also we have the cache size recommendation. Just if your cached file is too big, it may slow down to archive and extract. So we would suggest to cache like up to 500 megabyte. Okay. Another great feature of Circle CI is orbs. So orbs are basically a reusable package of YAML configuration, and you can use those orbs. You can create, you can use publicly available orbs, you can create your own private orbs. And depending on your requirements, you may need or you may not need orbs. For example, if it's reusable parts within just one project, you may not need to use orbs, so you can use just, you can declare the reusable jobs or commands within your workflow. And so how orbs helps to optimize your CI/CD? The first one is just it makes your configuration file neat. It minimizes your config file. For example, let's say in this example, Circle CI node orb is used. The left side is without orb, and the right side is with orb. So here, so we are installing the packages, and saving those packages and then running npm test at the left side. And with orb, you can do all these commands with just one line. First, you need to import the orb. And then in your job, you just use the orb command. Here, for example, it's not test. And inside that not orb, when the not test command is run, there are already steps which included restoring, saving, installing packages, restoring and saving data, cache data, and installing the packages and running npm tests. So orbs basically help you to start quickly with Circle CI. If you can check what orbs are available at Circle CI hub registry, and for popular languages, for popular tools, for example, for Slack or for AWS S3, there are orbs available with just a single line of command. You can just easily start running your jobs. And in some cases, you may want to have your own private orbs. It may be due to security reason, or it may be due to, for example, you have deploy steps which are used between the projects. In that case, you can create a private orb and use that private orb within your organization. So private orbs are not listed on Circle CI public registry and only available to use within the organization. Okay. Yeah, another important part of CI/CD is how to secure your credentials when running your CI/CD jobs. Those jobs run on isolated machines. So you want to elevate, or you want to manage your credentials. So now let's talk about those credentials, how you can plan, how you can use Circle CI features to manage your security. Okay. So at Circle CI, we do have different security tools or different security practices. So we do have, for example, you can use at Circle CI API tokens for your projects or as a personal token. So when using those tokens, there are some important keynotes to think about and to manage those tokens. So let's talk about this brief. Let me introduce briefly what does this API token, so you can understand its radius of usage, and you can manage how to secure your credentials. So you can have personal project tokens. The personal tokens is just your personal access to at Circle CI. So you can create a personal token at UI, and when you create that personal token, it gives access to all projects which you have access. So, and it's really important to list those personal tokens and see where they are used. You do not have, for example, the expiration date of the personal tokens if you're not, so just you need to check what personal tokens are available, and then manage and delete the unused one. And there are project tokens as well, which are specifically limited to the project. So with that token, you can have access only limited to the project. So depending on your needs, you can create personal project tokens, but you need to carefully analyze and see whether they use it. For example, you can use the API token, personal tokens for CLI. You can create the orbs. You can create namespaces, or you can run jobs locally. But if you create too many personal tokens, and you may, if you, let's say, don't know where they use it, we would recommend just checking and deleting unused ones. And for project tokens, there are like 3 types of tokens. The one is the status, read-only, and admin. So when you create the tokens, you need to specify which type. By default, I think it's the first one is the status. If you need the admin privilege for the token, you need to change that. And you cannot edit project or personal tokens. You cannot check the value once they created. So if you forget the value, you need to create a new one. So store them carefully, and if you forget, just create a new one. And also, we do have environment variables at Circle CI. So the environment variables is basically for users storing credentials for the project, and they are not readable and not editable as well. And the important note when creating those variables, the value should be more than 4 characters. If it's less than 4 characters, it will not be masked. It will be, you can see the value on the log. So the value should be more than 4 characters, and then the value should not be equal to true. If it's true, you can check on the logs. So other than that, when you create the environment variable, so if you just follow the instructions, those environment variables are masked. So when you run a job, those variables are set up at the beginning of this job, and they are masked properly. So users cannot see that. Okay. Yeah, you can easily create those environment variables from Circle CI UI. Just go to the project settings and add variable. They are just limited to the project. You cannot use the same environment. You cannot use those environment variables in another project. If you want to reuse some of the variables within your projects, you need to use the context. Okay, and the context, it's just provide mechanism to create those environment variables on an organizational scale, and you can use those environment variables within different projects in the same organization. And contexts are created from UI, or you can create from Circle CI CLI, as long as you have the personal token, and that personal token, that user is the admin, you can create the context. To create the context, you need to be the org admin. And okay. Another additional feature of the context is that you can assign the teams to each context. For example, you can create, let's say, infra context, and this in your GitHub, you create, if you have, let's say, infra team, Circle CI gets teams from your VCS, and when the context created, so you can edit the context and then select a team and assign that context. So whenever a user tries to run a job with that context, it checks its permissions if that user is within that team or not. If it's not, the user is not within that team, the job fails because it's not authenticated. You can use this kind of method for example, deploy jobs, or for some specifically environment-related jobs. Okay. And as some best practice of the context, we would recommend creating the multiple contexts instead of just saving all your environment variables in one context. So it kind of reduces the blast radius in case of compromise. So how contexts work is that whenever your job runs and you use that context, that job would have access only to that context. It doesn't have access to other contexts. So we would recommend to create like multiple contexts. Just creates a lot of like just use related credentials on that job. Do not use other context. Do not specify other contexts if you don't need. Just make it smaller. And we would suggest to rotate your secrets regularly and with a limited scope. So just each team, you know, which team have access to what job, and you can limit the access. And of course, do not store your any credentials within your config file. Config file is just part of your source code. So do not store in the config file or any part of your source code. Yeah, it's just a common practice, not CI/CD tool, just a common practice. Okay, and yeah, you can easily create a context from your organization settings, or you can easily create this Circle CI CLI tool. Oh yeah, just one thing I forgot to add. Just when you create the context first, its default security group is like all members, so it gives permission to all members. So you need to edit it. If you want to limit the context team, you need to create first, then edit. So it's just by default, when it's created, it gives all the members to the organization just have access to that context. Okay.